some of the key differences between secular, most secular models and biblical counseling?
Yeah.
In other words, how does biblical counseling differentiate itself from just everything else that's out there?
Yeah. Yeah. I think to kind of help navigate, the world we're in, and I think coming back to what I had mentioned earlier about how there's this huge underestimation about the effect that sin has on the mind. And so again, if you have, right, a population that doesn't want to talk about sin, doesn't acknowledge sin or anything of that nature, then you have to at some point have to start trying to make sense of it, because the world wants to make sense of it. And if man is inherently good or a blank slate, you can understand why mental illness becomes a real attractive paradigm for thinking, because it, in their mind's eye, it helps them make sense of why people would do what they do. Okay, so you kind of can see that. So there's a few things to think through. One would be, how do we know what we know, or the study of just knowledge, epistemology. But how do we know what we know? And so a different, when you think about secular systems, how do they know what they know is going to be done by either intuition, it just kind of seems right, or reason, it's reasonable to me, it's logical to me, or empiricism, the idea of observing the world around us and trying to develop some type of conclusion. And this is where we have to admit, the one thing to understand is secular, non-believing psychologists who are honest about their field speak about this all the time. And what they say is, it is not a hard science, and it is not authoritative. The honest ones will say that. But there's also those who say, oh no, it's absolutely right. But again, it's based on empirical data and observation, but it's still interpreted by man. So even though it's supposed to kind of guard against intuition and reason, it still very much has to be interpreted by man. And so can we make use of the things we observe? Absolutely. But they need to be interpreted by the Lord. Again, that was the basics of creation. Here is the world around you. Observe it, interact with it, work with it, but depend on the Lord to help you understand it and know how to handle it. So that's a good, that's always a great question, even for people who, talk about certain things, like even that situation, like with the parenting, don't ever talk about those things. Well, how do you know how do you know that's helpful? How did you come to that conclusion? Or where does that information come from? Those are great questions for us to ask, because there's an epistemological difference between biblical counseling and humanistic thinking. And so we're going to look at revelation as that which we can depend on. The second is just going to be, how about a person's understanding, again, of man, right? Anthropology, again, man being, if man is, and this affects the way you approach what's good for others, because if man is inherently good or a blank slate, then his problems are outside of him, not inside of him. And that's why most systems are going to blame outside issues for the problem, or causation, right? My parents, my upbringing, my lack of opportunities, or different things of this nature. This is the cause, or my biology is the cause, and then that develops solutions. Because if my situation is the cause, like let's just say my spouse is the cause for my unhappiness. Great, divorce him. Go get another spouse. Leave work. House, get another house. Change the environment. Okay, that'd be the solution. Biology, to a certain extent. I mean, this is why the pharmaceutical companies are very happy with all of this, and because a lot of money's being made, ton of money's being made on this whole industry, and the secular people are the ones even having the conversation, saying we're over medicating, we're over. Yeah, I mean, they're the honest ones are talking about this all the time. So sometimes we act like there's a consensus among the secular world about these things when there really isn't. And But again, if biology is the problem, let's change the biology in some way. And you see that now happening in very drastic measures. Where people are actually mutilating their bodies and changing their biology, with the hopes that this is going to help them feel better and be right and be happy. And so the one they have difficulty with, right, would be experience. How do you change experience? And so that's what led to solutions like electroshock therapy, because the idea there would be, if your guys' phones start acting up, what do? You reboot your phone. Now it works better. Well, that was the idea behind that. You kind of shock the system, shock the body, and somehow it'll reboot you and kind of help take away some of the residual effects of your past experiences or something of that nature. Or hypnotism, that's actually really popular. Matter of fact, talking about Albuquerque, New Mexico, I talked with a psychotherapist from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he teaches people how to hypnotize themselves. So self-hypnotherapy, that's what he calls it. So again, you'll see that they'll come up with the solutions based on what they think of what mankind is. And so that's why, as followers of Christ who believe in the Bible, and the Bible tells us that, man, right, the sins of man, everyone is carried away by their own lusts and so on and so forth. It's not what's outside the person, it's what's inside the person. But the solution is outside, not inside. Because, a lot of the secular systems, you're the answer to you're the answer, you're the solution. And it's, let's go discover you, let's go find you, let's tap into the power within and so on. Whereas the scriptures point out that the greatest need, is outside of us. Solution's outside of us. It's the cross, it's Christ, it's the gospel. So that's, those would be a couple of major differences, right? Is how do I know what I know, and what is man, and how do I understand who man is? So those are the two, biggest things. And then, because then you can start walking through what's their view of God, and that's almost just non-existent. What's their view of Christ, and what's their view of sin, and so on. And you just kind of keep walking through that and realize they have no view, and they reject half of it, and so on and so forth. And I don't know how it's going here, but I can tell you in the States right now, it used to be, if I was a secular counselor and I was helping somebody, and that person went to church, that was a positive. Like I would look, oh, that's good that you're going there. You're going, and you're around people, nice people, you're caring for each other, and so on. That used to be okay. But now, see how things change. Now, what is taught at the church is now being seen as bad for you and even toxic for you. And so that's why I'm saying how things change all the time. And some of it right now would be like, say, in the area of marriage or transgender, homosexuality, and so on and so forth. It used to be, right, to talk, if the church taught that those things were wrong, that was okay. It's okay. The church wasn't seen as a bad place. Well, now it's being seen as a bad place. And matter of fact, I just read an article today. I think it was in the state of Arizona. It was in Arizona where a school board was voting to not hire teachers from a Christian college any longer. Why? Because of their views on marriage. And we don't want those teachers in our schools teaching our students such bad things. And so it's even changing now. And they're not in some of the secular world. So that's like an ecclesiology. Now we're just getting down to what's their view of the church. And it used to not be a threat. Well, now it's starting to become a threat, a growing threat to somebody's psychological health is the church. So those are some of the big, areas